To find oneself and know oneself, first of all we have to know what is oneself. When we refer to oneself, myself, we refer to a body and mind. Both of these together make what is called ourself. As an example to understand what the body and mind is, and what's the purpose of each, we can think about a taxi and how it works. A taxi has 3 things that allow it to do its job and fulfill its purpose of being a taxi. First of all, it has to involve a car. However, the car alone will not go anywhere, it needs a taxi driver. The taxi driver tells the car where to move, where to go. He directs it, he stops at red lights, manipulates the car, and yet the taxi driver doesn't decide where he goes. It's the passenger who pays him, and whatever passenger gets in his taxi, it is this passenger who dictates where the taxi will go. So if the passenger is a drunkard, for example, he will tell the taxi to go to the bar. And if the passenger is religious, he will tell the taxi to go to the church. So the taxi and the taxi driver are both neutral in some sense. So they're both merely operating the taxi. But it is the passenger that directs the taxi and gives the taxi its meaning, if you like. The body is like the car and the mind is like the taxi driver. The mind tells the body to do everything, tells it to move, to speak or to stay silent, to get up, to lie down, reach out to steal something, or reach out to help someone who has fallen. But who is directing it? Who tells it where to go? Who is the passenger? You might want to say that the passenger is me, myself. But wait, don't be so hasty to decide. A taxi has many passengers, not just one. If it were only one, it would not be a taxi. And in the same way, our mind has many passengers that guide it. Some are good and some are bad. Did you ever think that the mind is not you? If the passenger that drives were you yourself, then why does it bring you so many problems? Being a normal human being, you must surely at least once have done something that you really regretted later, which, long after it was done, could be seen clearly and easily as being the wrong decision, the wrong thing to do, something that caused pain to yourself or to others, or, even more often, to both. So what causes you to do something harmful and to regret it later? At one moment, for example, sitting in the car as I pull out of the driveway, in my mind there is no need for a seatbelt. I'm only going just around the corner. But if I turn the corner and see a police car waiting for me right there, asking me to pull over, now this sight immediately sets off a tirade of abuse inside. "You stupid idiot! Why didn't you just put on your seatbelt? Now I will get a ticket, a point on my license, and then I will have to live with the regret of not having taken just a few extra seconds to put on the seatbelt." My mind will replay the scenario again and again, with the wish or the longing to go back and do it differently. Why didn't you just? So who is the passenger that gives the direction to not put on the seatbelt? And who is the passenger that later on nags and complains and beats me up for that very action? If there were only one passenger in my mind, me, myself, why should my own actions and thoughts cause such suffering to myself? If we suffer from anxiety, fear, agitation, insecurity, negative and nagging thoughts that continue racing around in our minds, even if we know they are unhelpful, who is the passenger that directs our mind to work in this way? The one who causes me pain is by definition an enemy, my very worst enemy, so how can it be myself? Is it not a great enemy that makes us suffer this way? As well as explaining or giving an introduction to the body and mind, this example also is a good place to explain about the practice of higher morality, where it's not just about following a set of rules. It's always the passenger that directs our actions, and if the passenger is an enemy, then the actions that follow will always be wrong. Only if the mind is driven by good qualities on the side of wisdom and selflessness can our thoughts, words, and physical actions truly be moral, truly be good. We call the enemies by the word kelisa, which is a word that has no direct translation in English. It means basically all emotions and impurities inside us that cause problems and suffering, and that keep us on the path of suffering rather than the path to go out of suffering. If the passenger in our mind is fear or laziness or jealousy, for example, and these kelisa are what drive our actions, they will never ever be able to give rise to well-calculated and wise actions that bring good results. It's impossible. The thing that creates the action that causes it from the very beginning is not good. It has no goodness, morality, or wisdom in it. If the cause is not good, the effect is not good. If the root of the tree is rotten and unhealthy, the entire tree, together with its branches and leaves, will be unhealthy too. Yet, although our mind is so very often unknowingly run by enemies, we do have access to friends too. Generosity, compassion, effort, honesty, patience, renunciation, qualities on the side of goodness and wisdom. When we want to practice higher morality, which is beyond simply not killing or stealing, we need to aim to grow these qualities in ourselves and train our mind to be guided only by them, rather than being guided by the enemies. We can't even keep the 5 precepts purely and properly, for example, if our mind is driven by kelisa or by enemies. If we're jealous and resentful towards somebody, our thought is neither moral nor just, it's only selfish, regardless of whether we physically hurt and harm them or not. Do we want to remain like this, or do we want to change? In meditation, we're learning to see our enemies, to know who our enemies are, and who our friends are. All the enemies have been the rulers of our mind for a very, very long time, but now we are throwing them out all, one by one. It's an uprising, a rebellion, though not the usual kind of rebellion because it's not against anyone outside. It is an inner rebellion. So to understand who am I and what is myself, we have to divide ourselves, body and mind. The body is like a taxi and the mind is like the taxi driver. But the important one is the passenger, who decides where the taxi goes. And this is something we can only see in each present moment, quality or kelisa, good or bad, right or wrong. That's where the passenger appears, and that's where we have a choice.